So, this is the part of the food bank where volunteers and staff pack emergency
Hello and
hampers
welcome to
for
Season 7,
food
Episode
programs.
4 of YXE
Usually
Underground.
when people think
I'm
about
Eric
food bank,
Anderson,
they think
and I'm
of
at the
this
Saskatoon
program.
Food Bank
So
and
it's
Learning Centre
providing,
with Kate Lasiuk.
2 hampers a month to individuals and families in need. Can be anyone, regardless of your income level, in the city of Saskatoon and area.
Kate
So
is the
we have
nutrition
different,
program manager with the food bank and is
categories,
walking me through the
represented
warehouse.
here, and people walk around and grab the right amount depending on the food hamper size that we're building, and then just around the corner, folks from the community come and pick it up. Food security has become, it's always been an issue. The food bank sprung up in the 80s during a recession at that time and just hasn't ever gone away because the need has continued. But I think increasingly in the last couple of years, with the cost of living going up, the cost of groceries going up, food insecurity has really increased sharply across Canada. I just did a presentation at the U of S about this the other day, and when I was making the presentation, I was looking at the number from 2 years ago, the percentage of people across Canada living with food insecurity. It was 15.7%, and 2 years later, it's almost 23% of the country. So there's been a really big jump. In Saskatchewan, it's 28%. So that's folks living with some amount of food insecurity, whether it's marginal or severe, but it's definitely a topic that's more and more on everyone's minds these days.
28%, Kate?
Yeah. And so and I think the important thing to keep in mind about that is all the ramifications that has in people's lives. It's associated with a number of different health concerns, mental health concerns, physical health concerns. If you want to talk policy perspective, it also costs our healthcare system a whole lot more to support people who are living with food insecurity than people who are food secure. So it's a really pressing issue, and something that if we can work to address it, we'll all benefit.
It's been a busy year at the food bank. The organization has seen a 25% increase in the use of its services in 2024, which works out to around 23,000 people a month coming to the food bank. Of those 23,000 people, 43% are children. These numbers, along with the food bank's plan to open a new facility in August of 2025 in the Pleasant Hill neighborhood, makes the organization's Light It Up fundraising campaign all the more critical.
It's exciting, it's overwhelming, it's all the things, but yeah, we're really, really looking forward to being able to better meet the needs of our community by having a space that's more conducive to the things that we do now. This whole Plant Possibility campaign has been about evaluating, what is the need for a food bank, or what does a food bank look like in 2024, 2025. I think everybody at the Saskatoon Food Bank and Learning Centre on staff is aware that providing emergency food is not the solution to food insecurity, that it's a larger systemic issue, and we need to be able to work with people upstream, and we need to advocate for better wages and supports for people who are dealing with food insecurity. But in the meantime, we're here and there's a need, so we're going to continue to provide food to the community, but what else can we be doing to help meet people's needs?
What do you need?
No, I think I'm okay.
Good.
I'm just
Like
wondering,
extra
do I just
papers
keep...
or what?
Nope.
One of the
I just
many
keep
unique
packing them like
spaces in
that
the food
and
bank
kind of-
is the Community Test Kitchen.
I have 4 more
This is where
packs
Kate
of
and her
these, so it
team
might
spend
be-
a lot of time leading community cooking classes as well as preparing food for the greater community. It smells good.
Yeah, we've got Sommerborscht, good old Mennonite staple.
Today, the kitchen is busy with volunteers from Campotex preparing wraps and baking treats. And over at the stove is Graham McDonald, one of 5 nutrition program facilitators at the food bank and a member of Kate's staff.
Trialing a recipe for an upcoming cooking class. So, lacto-fermented fries, which were really good, and I'm sorry you missed out. They were really good. We have actually potatoes.
Graham teaches in-person and online cooking classes to community members, and it's a role that requires a lot of flexibility and planning. He is grateful to have a boss like Kate who excels at both.
I could go on for hours. We're getting sizzle here, first of all. But she really does a phenomenal job of not just like taking initiative, but really supporting us. And she oftentimes she's considered, like if she's asking us to work with a certain group or something, she's already considering the things that we're going to need to be successful for those groups that we work with. So it's very much less of a, she doesn't expect us to come up with what we need from her. She's already thinking of it, and usually it's stuff that I haven't even thought of myself. So she's also just a lot of fun to be around. She really cares, and it's so obvious. She's so thoughtful and she's so caring that not only with staff that she's supervising, which in my case is not an easy task. I'm not an easy person to supervise. So she handles that with good humor and grace, but she also really cares about the community that we work with, and so she's always putting them first and making sure that what we're doing is serving the community in the best way that we can.
The nutrition program at the food bank has been in operation since 2019, so it's relatively new, but under Kate's guidance, it is teaching people not only the basics of cooking, but the joy that comes with preparing a meal. The cooking classes, whether they are in person or online, are also bringing people from diverse backgrounds together, and I think that's definitely worth celebrating. It was a pleasure sitting down with Kate to talk about the difference the nutrition program is making in Saskatoon and why this work means so much to her. We sat down in a quiet room, and I started by asking Kate how she goes about teaching nutrition in a community setting.
We really try to meet people where they're at, both physically by actually coming to people's spaces and cooking in other kitchens that belong to partner agencies, and or meeting them in their homes by doing online cooking classes. And I can tell you more about that later, but also in terms of the topics and the content and the tone of our classes, we really try to make it approachable and friendly and sort of come as you are. And we focus on a lot of things besides nutrition proper.
So what would be an example then, like some of the topics that you go over at one of your classes?
Yeah, so we often offer classes as a series. So that gives us a chance to get to know people and to build on skills week to week. So usually classes are offered in a series of 5 to 7, can be more depending on the group. But we use a curriculum that's based on one from Community Food Centres of Canada, and it's called Food Fit. And we've sort of taken bits from that and adapted them, as well as we all have food backgrounds in the departments, so kind of using our own life experience and knowledge. And we teach everything from, food skills like how to make soup, how to make a one-pot meal, how to make really quick breakfasts or kid-friendly foods, and then nutrition concepts, keeping them really basic. What does a balanced meal mean? How do we make a meal that's going to be affordable, but also have some staying power in terms of keeping us feeling full, something that's delicious and pleasurable. We really try to focus on food being a positive thing, not shaming, not, subscribing to healthism and getting all, you have to have only broccoli and chicken, or, we do bake and we do make all sorts of treats, and it's really about encouraging people to have a better relationship with food, which I think we could all use.
Oh, that's so true. Oh, there's so many questions I want to ask from that, but I'm glad you brought up the when you said, you got to eat your broccoli and you got to eat your veggies, because I was thinking about that the other night when I was on supper and my wife said to me, like, there's a lot of greens still on your plate, and I was like, I know, I just didn't feel like eating them tonight, but it was like I knew what she was getting at, and she was right. But like, how do you make it like you said, like enjoyable and fun? And because food is so much fun and cooking's so much fun, but yet, like, I didn't realize you had a curriculum as well. Like, how do you balance that, Kate?
Yeah, the curriculum was really just a starting point for us to kind of use to guide the way that we worked. But we really try to ask people when we're working with a new group, what do you want to learn? What kinds of things are your priorities? Depending on which kind of group it is, it could be kid-friendly meals, it could be diabetic friendly desserts, or it could be a specific dish that they saw online that they really want to learn. We work with a lot of newcomer groups, newcomers to Canada, refugees, and often for them it's something totally different. It can be, what does the Canadian food landscape look like? How do I cook with all these local vegetables that I haven't seen or I'm not maybe familiar with? How do I make a birthday cake that, in the sort of Western style of making a cake that, we could serve at my daughter's birthday, or, stuff like lasagna or, pizza or pasta. So we really try to get input from the participants so that we make the class as relevant and as interesting to them as we can.
Wow. How big are the classes?
We keep them small, partially because we don't have a lot of space to host a lot of people, but also because we really want to keep it intimate and make sure that people can develop relationships with each other and with the facilitator. So anywhere from 10 to 12 people, and that goes for the online classes as well.
I wanted to ask you about newcomers. So when they are coming to a class, what is the vibe like? What's the feeling like? Because I'm sure they must have so many questions that I think a lot of us who have grown up in Saskatchewan or in Canada probably take for granted. But what is the vibe like in those classes?
It can really vary. We've worked with some groups that are all part of the same community. So we had some funding to work with Afghan refugee groups when they were coming over in larger numbers. And so in many cases, some of those folks knew each other already, or had at least a common language. In those cases, we actually worked with a translator who would translate the class as we were teaching it.
Really?
Yes. Wow. And we would translate the recipes. We'd had someone do that. So really, again, that whole thing of meeting people where they're at. Other groups of newcomers don't know each other. They maybe don't have a common language. So it can be anything from joyous to intimidating, a mix of both. Sometimes people need to take some time to warm up, but I think that's pretty common across the board for humans. So we really try to build in opportunities to interact. Often our classes will start with a check-in or some way of talking about how you're doing or sharing, something about your life, the first food you learned to cook, or something that you did recently that you're really proud of. Or, we try to build in not just teaching about food skills and nutrition, but also a social connection piece and a mental health promotion piece as well.
I think that's so interesting too, because I do think cooking is one of those things where it can bring, and cooking and eating can bring people together. With the example that you used with the Afghan refugees, is it a case where, Kate, like do you teach them in terms of here are some of the more traditional foods that we make in Canada, or is there a desire to they are coming over, eating certain foods and having certain staples in their lives? Do they want to bring that here too? What happens? Yes,
yeah, it's really important that we also make sure people can, figure out ways to have the foods they're familiar with and comfortable with in Canada as well. So we've done some additional things like providing resources on some of the grocery stores that focus on halal meats and other ingredients that would be familiar. There are quite a few of them popping up in the city, which is great. We've done grocery store tours at a place like Superstore just to talk about, okay, here's this wildly intimidating, bright, noisy place. How do you navigate it? How do you find the deals? How do you eat healthy in this environment? That kind of stuff.
So you go out to a grocery store then. What's that like?
It is, we often do it at a large grocery store like Superstore, and it's a very noisy place, as you know, and a very busy place. But yeah, people have said that it's really helpful to kind of have that introduction and talk about everything from how do you read nutrition labels, how do you read the price tags to kind of figure out what the cheaper option is, this whole thing about shopping more along the edges of a grocery store where the fresh foods are, that the whole supermarket psychology thing. So there's lots to learn for all of us, I think, but especially if you're new to the country in terms of navigating the food environment that we live in.
I was just thinking I would love to go on one of those tours too to learn. There is there's a way that the stores are laid out, and yeah, all those.
Totally.
Gosh, I would take that for granted, but that's so good you guys do that.
It's a wild place. If you step away from, if you spend 3 months at your cabin and you go back to a supermarket, you're like, whoa, it's really bright in here. What are all these giant apples that look the same? Like it's a very particular kind of environment.
Kate, do you notice, like, especially with newcomers that are coming to your classes, after a while, is there a sense of camaraderie that starts to build within those classes?
Yes, absolutely. Not just with newcomers, but with all the groups that we work with. We do find that, and it is really one of the three, when I talk about the goals of our program to funders, that's one of the 3 prongs that we think of as importantly as the nutrition and food piece is social connection. Again, like building community connection. So yes, absolutely. People have talked about meeting friends and staying in touch, or people's kids will sometimes make friends if we have a class where kids are involved as well. People share about some of the difficulties in their lives. We've had moms share about, falling back into addiction, and the other moms sort of talking about how they've been there as well and how they found their way back out and through that situation. And so really food can serve as, we work in food, but we work in health and wellness broadly, and food can serve as a connector in a lot of ways.
I was just thinking too, so many great conversations happen in the kitchen, don't they?
Absolutely. Yep. And it's a great de-stressor. It's nice to, at the end of the day, do something with your hands, not have to step away from whatever's going on in your life and do a simple task and come away at the end with something tasty to eat. And people do get to eat what they make, bring home leftovers. So there's lots of food being provided as well.
Another thing that you mentioned earlier about the cooking for kids, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I just feel like for a lot of families, like dollars are being stretched very thin. And so I imagine like a class like that would just be so appreciated by many people. Yeah,
absolutely. We kind of across the socioeconomic spectrum, not just the community that we work with, we're all cooking less and we're all learning to cook less. And so learning those food skills and getting familiar with ways to take care of yourself and being able to navigate when food prices go up, what are the alternatives that I can make? How can I substitute ingredients? That kind of stuff can be really helpful in terms of giving you some agency to take care of yourself and your family. And then there's the whole thing of like, okay, we all know that lentils are nutritious, but are my kids going to eat them? Do I even like them? So trying to figure out ways to do all of that, but also make sure we're teaching recipes that people's families will enjoy.
How hard is that to do, like from your perspective?
It can be tricky. That's why we have such a wonderful team of 5 program facilitators, and they all have backgrounds in either nutrition or cooking and the culinary world, or both. And we need to get really creative because we're often working with donated food as our ingredients. Primarily, we do have a budget to be able to purchase a few supplemental things to make sure that we can teach whatever recipe we want to focus on. But it's sort of like, okay, there's a huge bin of cauliflower that's come in. Like, what do we do with cauliflower? Okay, let's think of cauliflower ideas. And it can change so much week by week. That we really have to get creative to be able to keep our program budget low and also make sure we're making recipes that, again, will appeal to people.
Oh my gosh. And like you said, it changes week to week. You don't know what you're going to get.
It's true. There are some kind of predictable things that come in usually that we can count on. But again, sometimes those things will all of a sudden not be there and we have to be purchasing them. So,
wow.
Yeah.
In terms of your programming then, does that make it challenging to program like far in advance, or do you sort of, you're nodding your head, yeah?
Yes, we kind of have a roster of recipes that are good go-tos, that either we tend to get those ingredients or we know we can purchase them affordably, and they tend to work for the kinds of concepts that we want to teach in the classes. But we do find that we can't promise what recipes we're going to teach far in advance for that reason. And that actually works pretty well because it gives us a chance to check in with people in the class after, say, 2 or 3 weeks to say, okay, we've done these things. What else do you want to learn now that you have a sense of what the class is like? Yeah. And so we can be adaptable in that way.
That makes so much sense though too, because I feel like people can be very particular about food, can't they? And everyone's tastes are going to be different, so you have to adapt to that as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And also, we want to really honor people's backgrounds and cultures and preferences. And yeah, so it's a tricky balance, but it's really important because I think, so I have a background in nutrition among other things. And there's been this movement away from sort of what are considered Western traditionally healthy foods only as being the only healthy foods. It's like only kale and smoothies. Like you have to have chicken breasts. Like there's lots of healthy foods across the globe and there's lots of healthful ways of eating. And so we're trying not to fall into that wellness culture and really trying to embrace diversity in our offerings.
Can you give me an example where you felt like, yeah, we embrace diversity this way, and maybe a way that you hadn't thought of a couple of years ago, but one where you kind of hit it out of the park?
Yeah, I mean, we're always working, we're always improving, but there've been a number of times where we've been able to either work with local ingredients. For example, we've had a longstanding relationship with the Whitecap Dakota First Nation, and so we do online cooking classes with them. For a lot of the families, it's tough to drive to the city and make that happen in terms of childcare, transportation. So we meet them, we pack ingredient kits, send them to their homes, and we meet online and we cook together. So it's a bit like HelloFresh, but with a live instructor. And in the case of that particular class, we were able to use the meat that the hunters from the reserve had hunted. So we made, Graham, one of our facilitators, made a meat stew that was with moose. And so being able to use those foods that came from the community. We've also done some cooking knowledge exchanges where, that Afghan refugee group that I was talking about wanted to cook their own recipes for us and kind of lead the class. And so we provided the ingredients that they requested and we all met and they cooked and we kind of had a bit of a knowledge exchange. So yeah, if you can get creative, there's lots of little ways to build in and embrace a diverse community.
Had you cooked Afghan food before?
No.
What was it like?
I unfortunately didn't get to cook anything that day. I was busy behind my desk, but it was a hit. It was very popular. It was a lot of fun for everyone. And I think really empowering for the women in the class to, feel some ownership and get to create foods. It was our last class. It was almost a celebration. Like often in the last class, we'll have something special or kind of a party or something. And so it was a way for them to celebrate and make their own food in group in Canada.
That is so neat. I also think that the fact that you're doing it online as well and that you send out the kits, like that you must be able to reach so many more people than maybe you were before.
Totally. Yeah, the online class thing came out of the pandemic. So we actually are a fairly new department at the food bank. We've only existed in this form for 4 or 5 years. Obviously, there were many cooking class type things before, but not in this way. We had some cooking classes in 2019. They were going well, and then the pandemic hit, and we had to get creative. This was actually before I even worked at the food bank, and so they moved all the cooking classes online. So when a lot of other agencies had to put their programming on hold, we were able to engage people in the community through this online cooking method. And it's really remained a big part of what we do because it takes away, like I said, a lot of those barriers in terms of what do I do with my kids while I'm at a cooking class? Or how do I get there when it's snowing? I don't have a car. And it also is nice for people to be able to cook in their own kitchens and kind of learn in their own environment where they'll be cooking more in the future, hopefully.
I hadn't thought of that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and we make a kit. It's got the recipes that are needed, maybe some other printed learning materials. It's got the ingredients they need to make the recipe once or twice, depending on what we can provide. Some additional snacks, and sometimes they'll get extra staples like a whole dozen of eggs, even if you just need 2, so they can keep the rest of the eggs for whatever future use. But we also send cooking equipment. So we'll send, really simple stuff like people don't have measuring cups or people don't have a baking sheet. And so we send that equipment and the family gets to keep it. So again, trying to encourage people to cook more in the future, to remake the recipe or make other recipes, and kind of building people's familiarity and their tools to be able to cook more.
Gosh, that makes so much sense, because I totally took that for granted when you were talking about cooking in the kitchen, because I'm thinking, like the space, and like you said, you're comfortable in the space. But if you actually don't have the measuring cups or the bowls or whatever, it's going to be hard to do that. So that you guys have thought of everything.
We try. It's been a learning process for sure. But, some people don't have a can opener even. And so it's important, to, whenever you're working with the community, to make sure you know them and know their needs as best you can. And in this case, it made sense for us to either seek donated kitchen equipment or purchase really low-cost kitchen equipment and to provide it for them.
It is striking me, talking to you, that when I think of cooking, I think of because I'm not very good at it, I follow the recipe to the letter. And to me, cooking is very rigid. It's I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this and this. But you have to be so flexible, Kate, in terms of what it is you're doing, because of the clientele that you're working with, whether or not they're there in person or they're at home. You have to be very flexible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's totally okay to follow a recipe, by the way. That's great. Okay. Some people don't even do that much, so I commend you. But I think it's kind of like a dancer, you start by learning all the basic steps, and then you can break the rules and be flexible and creative and stuff like that. And I think that's a common kind of learning curve for people, and it's definitely a testament to the skill level of our facilitators, who can really adapt and adjust to all these different variables changing all the time.
Yeah. Do you think of yourself? I'm just thinking in terms of a managerial position. Have you always been kind of a flexible leader and flexible manager in terms of empowering your team?
Yes. I mean, this is my first full-on managerial job. I always like to be very transparent about that. I am not an expert. I'm learning as I go. But I do think, my first degree was in international development studies. So my goal was to go, work for the UN and save the world, which, there's lots of problematic things about that. But anyway, and honorable and problematic. But one of the key things that I took away from that was, you are not the expert. The people on the ground are the experts. And I really think in this case, the community members that we work with are the experts in their own situations and their own lives and challenges. And the facilitators that I support as their manager are the experts in the work that they do. I actually started as a facilitator, so I also have some experience cooking and teaching in the community as well. But it's been a few years since I've done that. So it's really important for me to always, be curious and to defer to what their experience is when we're planning.
Yeah. Where did your love of cooking come from then?
Good question. I grew up in a big Saskatchewan family that, all the women were really prolific cooks, and my mom actually worked in nutrition as well, briefly, nutrition research on campus. So I think that was part of it. I grew up from a very young age knowing about gluten and fiber and all these weird things that certainly weren't trendy at that time. Then I sort of did a lot of exploration with my own diet and noticed how differently I felt when I sort of ate in different ways. And it's also, for me, a really important connection to the environment and the way that we take care of the planet. It's one of our biggest connections to the earth is how we eat. We eat 3 times a day. That comes from somewhere, right? And it's a connection to culture, it's pleasure. So it's kind of a holistic thing for me. It's certainly not everything, but it links to so many things in my life, and I think all of our lives.
Oh, you're so right about that, Kate. I do think it is holistically, and it checks off so many boxes in terms of different aspects of our life. Do you find too, being in Saskatoon, because I do think, and I've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but more in terms of like a kind of the restaurant experience and stuff. But from a food bank perspective, having so many local producers, is that a benefit to have access to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Our farmers support us. There's a lot of donations that come from farmers, from companies that produce, pulses and oats and those or related products. So yeah, it's nice for us to be able to showcase those things. We do also, when we're able to, offer outdoor cooking classes in our urban agriculture, what we call the garden patch. So that really allows us to kind of make the full connection for people with where their food's coming from, what grows here seasonally in this kind of relatively cold climate that we have, and yeah, kind of connecting with this place.
Can you tell me more about the garden?
Yeah, so our garden patch was a wonderful place. We're just transitioning now to our new building. So our garden patch just had its last season this year, which is why I might refer to it in the past tense, but really magical. Garden patch is kind of a misnomer. It's more of a urban farm. It was a full 1 or 2 city blocks, so quite large, and they produced, thousands of pounds of produce that went into the hampers in our emergency hamper program, and they also taught gardening classes and different kind of learn to grow your own food initiatives. So really quite a magical place, and we always, for many of the facilitators, by far their favorite part of their job was to cook in the garden patch kitchen with some of our groups.
Yeah. Do you find too, like, are people, whether they're new to Canada or they've lived in Canada their whole lives, do you find that sometimes they are surprised that, like, right, this is where our food comes from? We can grow it here. We do grow it here.
Yes, 100%. I think so many of us have become really detached from where our food comes from. We all move around so much, and many of us live in cities. We've moved away from eating just what grows locally, which I have to say I'm grateful for in some ways. I like having lemons and I like having tea, but also we lose that connection, and we lose this connection to the seasons and to the sort of the traditional ways of living, which we could all, I think, probably benefit in learning, reconnecting with and learning more about. So it's always a pleasure when we get to make that connection for people again, or teach anything about that relationship. Yeah.
I've learned so much from you just in the last 27 minutes. It's amazing. Can I end with a really big question? Like you've talked about the importance of, like, for everybody to have some sort of connection to food and the benefits that cooking can bring. How do we get I think for people that maybe want to reconnect that way, or maybe make some steps that way, like how should we go about doing that? That's a really big question, but I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it can be as simple as just starting to pay attention to where your food is coming from and what season certain things are coming in and out of the grocery store. Noticing that stone fruit only come in the summer, that citrus is at its best in the winter, looking at the little stickers that tell you where it's coming in from. But you can also, if you want, start to grow things in your own kitchen, little, herb plants, or, a tomato plant on your deck can be a nice way to get curious and experiment without getting in too deep. But I also think just cooking, the more that you cook and experiment, the more you get to know about food and where it comes from and when it tastes the best, and, kind of get really messy, get your hands in there. That connection, I think you can't help but be reconnected by just cooking more.
I love that. Before I let you go, or before we head back over to the food bank, what is your favorite thing to cook?
Oh gosh, these days I am so utilitarian with my food, which we also really want to tell people is okay. Like, you don't have to be a gourmet cook. You can just whip something up. Fed is best, you often hear that. And so often I'll just whip up a quick, like, stir fry or pasta dish. And lately I've been very surprisingly to me, getting back into baking. I'm not much of a baker, but I've been making pumpkin loaves and banana loaves and that kind of thing, and it's been kind of fun. So, yeah.
Kate, it was such a pleasure meeting you this morning. I just wanted to take the time to say thank you for, we've been emailing for like a couple months to make this happen, and it's just been like such a pleasure speaking with you. So thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for coming and for your interest.
This has been episode 4, season 7 of YXC Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. My thanks again to Kate Lasiuk and her colleagues for making us feel so welcomed at the food bank. You can visit saskatoonfoodbank.org to learn more about the nutrition program and the Light It Up fundraising campaign. You can listen to YXC Underground wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or on the website yxcunderground.com. Please feel free to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. You can also follow YXC Underground on social media. Simply search YXC Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also now find YXC Underground on YouTube, which is very exciting and long overdue. My thanks to Saskatoon's Rana Andres for the lovely photos she took for this episode, which you can see on social media and my website, and also to my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the original theme music for the podcast, and to Saskatoon's Danger Dynamite for creating and maintaining the website. I do want to give a shout out before I go to this year's Grade 8 EcoQuest class that invited me to their classroom last month to talk about the podcast. It was so much fun speaking with them. Tyler and Rebecca, you are amazing teachers. If you go all the way back to season 1 of the podcast, I did an episode on the EcoQuest program, which is just a really great program as part of the Saskatoon Public School Division. In this year's class, they are exceptional. They asked really great questions, and I just want to thank them for having me and wish them the best of luck this year. And I also want to give a shout out to the CFCR Radio Club that meets every second weekend. They invited me on a Saturday to their space at CFCR headquarters on 3rd Avenue. And it's a very eclectic crew of kids. And they had amazing ideas for podcasts, and I would love to have stolen some of those ideas, but from the sounds of it, they're going to run with those ideas. So to the CFCR Radio Club, thank you again for having me. It was so much fun, and best of luck with your podcasts. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge that these interviews were gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Metis. YXC Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. Have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon in 2025, Saskatoon.
What we're doing is serving the community in the best way that we can.
Thanks, Graham. I'll let you get back to your time.
Okay, thank you.
That was good.
So glad I was rolling on that too.